Chapter 6. It was the Saturday after Sarah had first shown up outside our house, and we'd arranged to meet in the park. I was sitting on a bench near the fountain, reading David Copperfield. I wanted her to see that I read books like this. After a few minutes, I saw her coming through the gates opposite me. I smiled and waved. It surprised me how happy I was to see her. "I wasn't sure if you'd be here," she said when she sat down. "I thought you might change your mind about coming." "No," I said, shaking my head. "I promised, didn't I?" I thought I was going to be late. Mum was going to the hospital to see Andy, and she wanted me to come too. And when I said I couldn't, she got mad at me. "Do you go often?" I asked her. "Every day." "Sometimes twice a day." "Do you have any brothers or sisters?" "I have an older brother," I told her. "Pete. He's 18 and in university in Edinburgh. He was supposed to come home for the summer holidays. He promised me he would, but then he changed his mind and went travelling around Europe instead." Sarah nodded. "Andy's my only brother too," she said. I wanted to ask her how he was, but didn't know how to phrase it. I knew it wasn't my fault that he was in hospital, but somehow I felt responsible for it. "Is he going to get better?" I asked her. "We don't know," she said. "We just have to hope that he wakes up soon." "He will," I said. "How do you know?" "I just do," I told her. She didn't seem too happy with me saying that and looked a little angry. So I bit my lip and decided I'd better think about things more carefully in future before I said them. She didn't seem like the kind of girl who just made idle conversation. "How did you know who I was?" she asked me after a few more minutes had passed. "When I came to your house, I mean." "You guessed immediately." "I don't know," I said. It just seemed to make sense. "Why did you come?" "I was interested, that's all. It was your mum I was looking for, really. I wanted to see what she looked like. And then I saw you. Everything's been so terrible these last few days." She leaned forward and put her face in her hands, and for a moment, and I was worried that she was going to start crying. I didn't know what I'd do if she did. There was no way I was going to put my arm around her. Not here, where anyone could see us. But when she lifted her face again, she just stared at me and shook her head. "It's not your mum's fault anyway," she said. "That's what's so terrible about all of this. It's my fault, but I can't tell anyone, and I don't know what to do to make it better." I frowned, uncertain what she could mean by this. I opened my mouth to ask her, but just as I did, I saw 3 people walking along the path towards us. My stomach sank a little, but it was too late to get away from them. It was Luke Kennedy with his mother and Benjamin Benson. "Danny," said Mrs. Kennedy when she reached us, looking at Sarah for a moment as if she was surprised to see me sitting there with a girl, as if this was the last thing in the world she would have ever expected. Even though I'd grown an inch and a half over the last 3 months, not that anyone had noticed except me. "Hello," I said, trying not to look at Luke, who was staring at Sarah. "I just came out for a walk." "You're not going to get much walking done sitting down," said Mr. Benson cheerfully. "Lots of exercise. That's what a boy your age needs. That and a good solid breakfast every morning. And an ice cold bath once a year, whether you need one or not." I frowned. I didn't know why he had to be so cheerful all the time, unless it was to impress Mrs. Kennedy. "Aren't you going to introduce us to your friend?" asked Mrs. Kennedy, and I stared at her, not knowing what to say. I didn't want to tell her the truth in case she told Mum or Dad and I got into trouble. Although I wasn't sure what I was doing wrong. It felt like I was doing something that they wouldn't be happy about. "We're not friends," said Sarah quickly. "I was just sitting here, that's all." "Oh, I'm sorry," said Mrs. Kennedy. "You looked so cosy there, the 2 of you. I didn't like to interrupt at first." "Chatting her up, I dare say," said Mr. Benson. "Oh, don't look so embarrassed, Danny. We all have to start somewhere." "You told me you were busy," said Luke, pointing a finger at me. "You said that was why you couldn't come out today." "I have to go," said Sarah suddenly, standing up. I looked at her, not wanting her to leave. I wanted Luke and Mrs. Kennedy and Mr. Benson to keep walking, and to stop trying to say funny or embarrassing things. I wanted to talk to Sarah on her own and have her tell me why the accident hadn't been Mam's fault at all, and why she thought it was hers. Wait, I said, but Luke interrupted me. Let's go and get the bikes, he said. We'll go out somewhere, just the two of us, he added. Goodbye, said Sarah, starting to move off. Wait, I repeated, but she shook her head. You don't have to leave on our account, said Mrs. Kennedy, who looked sorry now that she had stopped to talk to us in the first place. Bye, shouted Luke to Sarah. See you around sometime, or not. She stopped and stared at him for a moment before walking on. He frowned, unsure how to handle a look like that. Sorry about that, old man, said Mr. Benson. Looks like we chased her away. I stayed out later than normal that night, and when I came home I found Dad sitting in the living room watching television. He glanced at his watch when I came in and looked a little surprised by how late it was. Danny, he said, it's nearly 10 o'clock. I know, I replied. What were you doing out until this time? I shrugged my shoulders and sat down. Sorry, I said. I lost track of time. So did I, actually, he said quietly. I didn't even realise it, or I would have started to worry about you. Where's Mum? You just missed her, he said. She's having an early night. Has she been in bed all day? I asked angrily. She was in bed when I left this afternoon. Danny, she got up shortly after you left. We had dinner together. We watched some television and, if you had come home on time, like you were supposed to, then you would have seen her, and you could have talked to her. And by the way, while we're on the subject, I'd appreciate it if you did a little more of that anyway. I nodded and thought about going to bed, but before I could, he laughed suddenly and turned back to me. Oh, by the way, he said, I talked to your Gran today. She and Grandad are coming to visit next week, for your birthday. I thought we'd have a small party. A party? I asked, surprised. Are you sure? Oh, just family, that's all, he said quickly. Your mother and I, your grandparents. We can ask the Kennedys too, if you like. I don't know if I want a party, I said. A party's the wrong word, he said, shaking his head. It's a dinner. Nothing more than that. A family dinner. Next Thursday. We'll have to eat, after all. Don't look so worried. It'll be fun. I shrugged. I wasn't really thinking about it anyway. I was wondering when, and if, I'd ever get to see Sarah again, and whether I'd ever find out why she thought that everything had been her fault and not Mam's. Maybe if I found out, I decided, I could tell Mam, and then she wouldn't be so upset anymore, and everything could get back to normal. Somehow I knew I had to find out Sarah's secret.